The average US driver spends 2.5 weeks a year stuck in traffic. Over the average American lifespan, that's almost 3 years, and that number is only going up. Now, I don't mean to break any barriers here, but traffic is soul-sucking. Not only does it take a huge emotional toll, but a physical one as well. All those hours are ones that you're sitting down and intensely focused on the car in front of you. It's been shown in study after study that the long commute raises your risk of depression, your cholesterol, and lowers your happiness by quite a bit. Not to mention that every minute you spend in your car, the chance of being involved in a fatal car accident goes up exponentially. Now, all of this sounds dire, but we do have a solution that's been shown to work wonders around the world. That solution is called public transportation. According to a study by Harvard, access to public transit is linked to increased life expectancy as well as higher income, education, and general happiness. Cities that prioritize public transit also have less air pollution and a much healthier population. As we face this climate crisis, everyone owning a car is becoming unsustainable. Cars emit 27% of all greenhouse gases in America. Electric cars aren't the solution either. Assuming that the electricity comes from a clean renewable source, the manufacturing of those cars is also unsustainable. Not to mention that the upkeep on both the government and personal side is really expensive. 8% of your income is sucked up by this thing that most people find annoying and could be unnecessary. So if we have such an easy solution to this glaring problem, why haven't we implemented it? Well, the answer to that is simple. It's not profitable to run a public transit system. But if you want a more in-depth answer, you're in the right place. As far as we know, public transportation started in 1820s France. It started with something called the omnibus. This sounds like a high-tech superbus, but it was just a horse-drawn car that held up to 10 people at a time. Alright, I'm not going to do a super long in-depth video today because that takes a super long time to make. So let's skip to the 1890s when my wonderful city of Boston opened the first subway system in the United States. The Boston subway started right here in Park Street. It was made so that workers could avoid the severe weather conditions we call normal in New England. It was pretty much the same as the omnibus, but it was on a track, which makes Boston win the first subway system by a technicality. All around the United States, transportation systems boomed and expanded. Our transit system was the envy of the world. Every major and minor city in America had an extensive rail system. Other countries even designed their own transit systems after ours. It's crazy how far we've fallen. In the 1880s, the streetcars moved from being pulled by horses to being electric, which made them cheaper to operate and much more reliable. So at this point, what could have possibly gone wrong? Well,
capitalism, God's way of determining who is smart and who is poor.
Running rail lines were very profitable. As cities expanded and industrialized, people began living further and further from their place of work. So their entire livelihood relied on these streetcars. They basically needed them to survive. In economics, this type of demand is called inelastic demand. Other examples of this type of demand is medicine and housing. No matter what you charge for this product, people will pay it because they rely on it. I'm sure you can see where this is going. This demand gave the owners of these rail lines an incredible amount of power over cities, and they sure took advantage of it. In the real world, there is a limited amount of space, especially in cities, so there's not a lot of space for competition. So it got to a point where one company controlled the entire transit system of a city. In larger cities, where there were a few companies, they quickly consolidated. They either ended up merging, or whichever company was smaller was bought by a larger company. As soon as this happened, fares got higher and higher. There was pretty much nothing people could do but pay the fares, because how else were they going to get to work? Eventually, cities saw this as a pretty major problem, and they entered into a contract with the rail company. The city would allow the rail company to operate as a monopoly as long as they agreed to some conditions. The two most important of which were that the streetcar fares would be capped at 5 cents, and that they had to maintain the pavement around their tracks. The streetcars had no problem meeting these conditions. Their profits were still sky high. This is where most people telling the story will say that cars became affordable and Americans picked cars over public transit. The end. As you can probably guess, that's not really the case. It was around this time that cars became affordable, but they also weren't very popular. Public transit was just cheaper and more convenient for most Americans, but they still caused problems for the streetcars. Even when only 10% of the population owned cars, they were causing serious congestion for the transit system. Congestion wasn't the only problem. Transit companies were required to maintain the roads around their tracks. Before cars, not really much was using the road, so the wear and tear was pretty marginal. But after cars hit the road, the pavement had to be constantly repaired. And so transit companies effectively ended up subsidizing the auto industry. Not only that, but this system was built on one pretty huge flaw. The entire system was pretty much private, so not too long after these contracts had been settled and the American public transit system was rapidly expanding, the Great Depression happened, and the companies running these lines collapsed. Since most Americans were unemployed, they couldn't pay the fares and didn't really have a reason to. Rail systems began to shrink even though the few Americans that still had jobs relied on them. There was one man with another very profitable industry behind him that saw a great opportunity in America's suffering. In case you don't recognize him, his name is William Durant, the founder of General Motors. GM had been around for a while at this point, but even as they made affordable cars, not a lot of people were buying them. The largest reason for this lack in sales was the extensive transit system the US had been enjoying, so he figured that if he could cripple transit systems, he could get people to rely on cars instead. Why sell one engine every 10 years to a streetcar that would serve thousands of people when you could instead make each individual person buy an engine every 5 years? So began an enormous lobbying effort and marketing campaign powered by the auto industry and oil industry that benefits from it. Since there was no public transit industry that could counter-bribe Congress, they were successful. Federal funding began prioritizing the building of new car-centric roads and cities. This effort culminated in the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act. This was the largest public works act in American history. The act authorized and funded 40,000 miles of highway as well as encouraged car-centric architecture. As you can see in all these cities, what this did was rip up residential communities and left mostly office buildings. The proposed solution to all of this residential area being destroyed is what we now know as the suburbs. People were forced to live further and further from their place of work. Since public transit was crippled, people were forced to buy cars, then buy gas for those cars. More people having cars means that more car-centric architecture was built, less people took public transit. All of this became a self-fulfilling cycle that has created the urban hellscape we live in today. Now, there have been a lot of movements lately to restore public transit to its former glory. However, they have very powerful opposition. It's headed by these guys, the Koch brothers. In case you don't know about them, they're demons. They own huge stakes in oil and car companies, so a revitalization of public transit wouldn't really be great for their bottom line. So they founded Americans for Prosperity. This is a conservative political pact with the sole purpose of fighting the expansion of public transit systems, as well as encouraging the expansion of roadways. A good example of their impact was in 2017, Nashville had a huge traffic problem. The mayor had a simple yet well-proven solution: expand bus routes and build a light rail system. It was put up for vote, and almost 60% of Nashville residents supported the plan. Then, Americans for Prosperity stepped in with a huge marketing campaign and lobbying effort, after which more than 60% of Nashville residents were against the new public transit. This is not just a problem with the Koch brothers. Now, it is true that they're absolute demons, but they're only one example. They are not crushing public transit just for the fun of the game. They are crushing it because public transit hurts their bottom line. No matter who runs the oil industry, that strong incentive to crush public transit will still be there. We designed our system to be a constant competition. You eat or get eaten. It doesn't have to be this way. We can live in a world where everyone is happy, a world where you don't have to sit in soul-crushing traffic for hours. Things can get better, and they will. The call to bring public transit back to America is gaining steam. Movements are made up of people, so don't be an armchair politician. Join your local DSA chapter, and if there isn't one, start one. If there's a ballot measure you want passed, research protests and canvassing events to support it. If you enjoy this video, feel free to give this video a like and subscribe for all sorts of similar content. Thanks for watching. See you next time.